Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Babbling Idiots. Today, we're going to talk about the Brock Turner case. We're going to go a little bit more in depth with gender equality issues and stuff like that. We have a guest today, Karunya, and she wrote an article on the Brock Turner case that she posted on her blog, which I thought was great, and I'm pretty sure Eric liked too. Say hi.
Hi.
Yeah, there we go. So I hope you enjoy this show, and thank you for listening.
So like how long ago did this happen? It was it was a couple weeks ago and we're just getting to it now. But
The case was, yeah, but the actual event was like a year ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And this girl finally decided to release a testimony and stuff like that. It's just crazy to me how a lot of rape cases go unreported, or even just like it takes such a long time for them to go reported.
mhm.
Yeah, I think the rape happened last year in February. And it amazes me how they kept it quiet for an entire year. I guess it's because they knew you know, it would spark this much of, like rage and like anger. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. And
Mhm.
like, as you said, a bunch of rape cases go undocumented.
But
And
did they know at that time that it was going to cause this much of an outrage? Because it's like, oh, he's a rapist. Yeah, he's white, but like he actually raped me and could go away for a long time for this. So did they know that it was going to turn to this whole thing? Because they couldn't have known what the outcome would have been.
I mean, he was like a kind of high profile person in a high profile college. And
Yeah.
any rape case is going to cause a lot of outrage, and especially just because of like his swimming career and just
Yeah.
the fact that he goes to Stanford, it makes it a high profile case already, you know?
hmm But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of truth. We don't have to say it any more than everyone else has, but there's a lot of truth in the fact that like a lot of rapes don't go, um, aren't brought to light, and that's what leads to a lot of people like not knowing what the actual rape statistic is. But like, I don't really care what the actual rape statistic is because it's like I just want to like fight rape,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things like we talk about any other crime, and we're like, how can we fix it? I know we talk all the time about there's like all sorts of gang crimes and theft and robbery and everything that people are kind of driven to by necessity sometimes, by poverty. So it's like we can fix some poverty and that might help. But with this, it's with rape, it's like just don't rape people. It's like how do you
How do you mess that up?
yeah, I'm sure there are people out there that are experts in these fields that know like, hey, here's some things we might be able to do. Um, but like I'm not I'm my solution is like don't rape people.
Yeah, don't
yeah,
rape
I mean,
people.
rape, like, compared to like things like poverty and stuff like that,
Mhm.
rape is a mindset. Like, people who rape have a mindset to rape. I think one thing, like especially in this case, that connects to all of it is like drinking and alcohol,
Mhm.
drug abuse,
The campus culture,
campus
especially.
culture. Exactly.
Yeah.
The big thing for me about this case is just how much everyone tries to justify it, and we were talking about this beforehand, and I think that's the thing that a lot of rapists have to do is like justify it to themselves, like,
Mhm.
oh, she like wanted it or something like that, you know, and it's just like, but it's not just the rapist in this case, it's also his father.
Yeah.
A lot of the statements coming from his father are trying to justify this. Like, I read one that was like, are we really going to judge him on 20 minutes of action for his 20 years of life? And I was like, yes, we are,
Yeah.
because that is like the literally the worst thing you can do to another human being is rape them.
Yeah. I mean, do we want to put that to the same logic as the Orlando shooter? Are we going to judge this guy for 20 minutes of his life? I mean, of course, like his whole life, he was a pretty like terrible guy. I mean, from people that know him, that's what they've said. He was pretty rambunctious. But I don't want to derail this into another Orlando argument. But like anybody that commits a terrible crime, it's like, yeah, we're going to judge your whole life based on that. That's just how it works.
And it's not even just the 20 minutes or so, as they say. Like, apparently this dude was hitting on the rape victim's sisters and other girls at the party and was being forceful with them. So it's obvious that this was not just 20 minutes of this guy's life. It was his whole life that he's been acting like this.
And then we've also talked about how like of course there's so much ambiguity sometimes with like whether there was sexual harassment or rape involved. Like there are people out there that want to tell people that if you uh, get tipsy and then have sex with someone and then regret the next day that you've been raped, and that's not the case. So there is ambiguity sometimes, but in this case there was none. She was unconscious, and it was by a dumpster, which just that frames it as a really dirty thing. Like it could have been anywhere outside, and that would have seemed like nearly as gross. But the fact that it was by a dumpster just makes it that much worse. And it's not just symbolism. It's like legitimately a terrible thing, and there should be no defending that.
Yeah. So there was this case in 2012. It was a gang rape in India. So basically, there was a girl who was with her boyfriend out at maybe like 9, 10 o'clock, and they got on a bus, and the bus had like 5 or 6 men, and all
Mhm.
the men they knocked out the guy was knocked out dead, the boyfriend, and they gang raped the girl on a moving bus on the streets of Delhi,
Mhm.
India. There was crazy, widespread outrage throughout the country when that happened. I remember I was a freshman in that when that happened. I actually mentioned it in my blog post too. I remember seeing it scared. And then 2 years later, I think they released a documentary on that
Mhm.
rape case and they actually interviewed one of the rapists
Mhm.
who I think is currently in jail right now too. And in his interview, he was trying to justify his rape too. He said, "Girls, girls and guys are different. If he said if girls are raped, they shouldn't be fighting it. They should just let it happen." And when I saw that, obviously there were tears in my eyes, but I was like, you know what? India is a third world country. It's a developing country. Maybe that's why. Maybe like people aren't exposed to the societal equality and stuff like that, like gender
Mhm.
equality. But then I see this here, and in a first world country, in one of the most powerful countries in the world, and to see people act like this here is just it makes me so angry.
Mhm. It makes me want to uh, of course, everyone also is blaming the judge. It's like it makes me kind of want to see like if the judge is legitimately stupid or if there was like something in it that compelled him. Because like I want to know what like I'd be willing to sit through all the court stuff that happened just to see what was in it that like might have convinced a judge to give a 6 month sentence. And also just like this idea that this guy having a big life ahead of him just makes everything okay. I mean, we'll probably get to the racist aspect of this, but I mean, just transcending race, it's also like because you had a better life ahead of you. Of course, that makes it sad because then people say, "Oh, this kid could have not done this terrible thing and then had a great life." But that's no thing to judge what sentence someone gets.
Yeah.
And the sentence is what's causing like the majority of the outrage,
Yeah.
6 months, and then he also has the option to get out after 3 months if like for good behavior or whatever. That's the worst
Mhm.
sentence I've ever heard. Like
Mhm.
that's the sentence someone would get if they just like stole a TV or something,
Yeah.
which is not even in the same ball field as what's going on here. And that's just what's causing all the outrage. Karunya, in your article, you said that you like for a moment you wish this person could be tortured for what they did. Obviously, that's a little bit of an overstatement, and like I'm not gonna hold you to those words. But what do you think would be an appropriate sentence at
Right.
this point?
So that paragraph in my blog post was basically like my thought process.
Mhm.
At the beginning, I was like, this guy needs to be tortured. He needs to be punished correctly. But then I realized, that's just my I'm mirroring the exact thoughts of another rapist.
Mhm.
Like they do things to torture other people, and so when I wrote that, it kind of scared me
Mhm.
because that was when I realized I'm like, whoa, these things that are happening are making me a bad person too. Um, but the 6 months, 3 months, whatever, however many months in jail won't do anything to him. Even if it was just 6 months, even if it wasn't the 3 months, even if it was just the 6 months, it's not gonna make the rapist side of him go away. He's gonna come back, and obviously he has white privilege. He may even continue raping women. For to me, it might seem like I don't know if it would be feasible, but to me, service always brings the good in people. And he, I feel like if Brock Turner had gone through a couple years in jail plus a couple years of service, any kind of service, that service always brings out the good light in people, and I feel like that would be a possibility, as it wouldn't be like exactly a punishment, but
Yeah.
more of something to fix him.
I mean, that makes sense, and that actually got me thinking, like, what if they forced this guy to help out with women who have been abused?
Oh,
you
that would
know?
be a good idea.
It would force him to like make the connection between his actions and the outcomes of those actions and what effects they have on women. That would, I don't know. I think that's a really good
Mhm.
idea, but I don't know how that would work in a system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so now we're talking about like punishment, and I like that idea. But before we said that, I was thinking of a little bit more of a direct like way to bring him to realize what he's done is like if he gets raped in prison. No, so I'm not saying like that should happen. Although like if it did, like nobody would bat an eye because it's like there's certain things that people aren't like proud to say they want to happen, but if it happens, then they can just be like they can smile on the inside. But I don't know what kind of like prison setup they're putting him in. I don't know if he's going to be in like some like delinquent prison, or I don't know if they're like throwing him in with like some roughed up gang members that can like do some damage to him. But I was also thinking the fact that he's getting such a low sentence means that when he gets out, people are going to treat him so horribly. Like this guy, I can't even imagine how he would get a job, and just everyone that sees him is going to know his face.
And he's going to be on the sex offender list for the rest of his life, so that's at least a little bit of justice.
Yeah. So, and that's all in effect of him serving such a short sentence. I mean, if he served like a full, I don't know what most sentences are. I think I see those like 20 years mostly, or I don't know what it is, but yeah, if he like served a full sentence for rape, then he would get that. And this case probably wouldn't have blown up as much, although it probably still would have blown up. But yeah, he wouldn't be facing as much like punishment from other people around him as he will.
Yeah, I think what you said, him being raped in prison or whatever. I mean, wasn't that one of the reasons why they gave him a short sentence, is so that he wouldn't be traumatized by a prison experience? Like they were trying to avoid that, and that's even more disgusting.
Yeah, we don't want him to be traumatized by something he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's just, it pisses me off when like they get into like the affluenza argument, like, oh, this person has had such a sheltered life, now we can't expose them to the realities of the world, now it'll be traumatizing. It's like, this is the world, this is real, you got to deal with it, all of us have to deal with it, you have to deal with it too. It just, that kind of argument pisses me off.
See, the thing is, the girl who was raped, she was probably, I'm sure she wasn't like raised in poverty or anything. Her sister goes to Stanford. She probably comes from a well-off family too, and she experienced this.
That's a good point.
So
yeah, it's like the innocence argument. It's like, oh, we can put this drug dealer away because he's been in the hood all the time and he's like seen people get shot and like get hooked on heroin or whatever. But to defend this guy's innocence when he took someone else's, it's like, that's not the argument you want to make.
And also, it's just, you're basically saying that someone shouldn't be punished because of the high class that they've had their whole life. Like, I thought America was supposed to be a country without classes and we're all supposed to be equal to one another. But you're literally saying that just because this person has had an elevated lifestyle more than the rest of us, they should be treated differently. And that goes against every American value that I can think of. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard from the standpoint of American values.
And if we want to go, we might go into the race side of it now. Like, if the exact same situation, if he was like still a great swimmer and was at Stanford and everything, but he was black, like it probably would have been different. It might have blown. Like, this is another thing. If there are these variables, I don't know how much it would have blown up or not. It probably still would have, just because he was like a good student at a good school and an athlete. But yeah, it would just be interesting to see what the results would be if he wasn't a white dude.
See, I think the reason why it blew up was because he was white and he was a good swimmer and he went to a great school and he got away with it.
Mhm.
there's so many cases of, maybe like minorities who rape women who are athletes and who, go to a great school, but those are hidden because apparently that's expected of them.
Yeah.
You know, this happens too, but it's just the fact that he's well known in, the swimming society and like things like that, which is why it blew up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things like this happen all the time, but, you know, he got caught, but he also got away with it. Like he got caught in the fact that there's so much media attention, but he got away with it legally. I mean, no one's gonna let him go though. I know
Yeah.
that for
Mhm.
sure. Like what you said before, like he's gonna come out of jail and people are still gonna treat him horribly.
Mhm.
His life is technically over, but I don't think
He
he
still
has the guilt.
deserves worse.
Yeah, he still deserves
Yeah.
worse. Yeah, exactly.
In Dr. Campbell's class, I took Dr. Campbell's world religions class this year. He talked about how like there's all those people on social media who are like, "Don't judge me. You haven't been what I'm through and stuff." And he's like, "That's the only way you can truly judge someone is from the outside perspective." But like something that he kind of went into after that was like, he was like, "I think public shaming is a very good way to punish people." And obviously everyone in the class was like, "Whoa, that sounds bad." Like,
Yeah.
we're kind of raised against that in a certain way. But like the idea of Brock Turner being like publicly shamed in all of this cases, even though he didn't receive legal judgment, this is the way that we can kind of like extend societal judgment against him. It's kind of satisfying.
Mhm.
So I can kind of see what
Mhm.
his point was when he said that.
There's a lot of like social psychology and sociology research into that, and there's books written all on it on why public shaming is a good thing because it discourages a lot of people from doing terrible things. Like if I have some belief that I think is kind of extreme, the one thing that keeps me from voicing it is like people are going to think I'm a terrible person if I
Yeah.
say it. Like, like you're the person that I can trust to like say something crazy to, and then you're like, Eric, that's really crazy. So then I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna go say it somewhere because
Yeah.
then everyone's gonna shame me. But another thing, something people use a lot in the race side of this argument is the pictures that they use.
Mhm.
So of course, people complain when black people are arrested of what image they're using, or people show the 7th grade photo of Trayvon or this photo from a long time ago of Michael Brown to show like that they were an angel. So then I saw some people. So of course there was that like nice grad picture of Brock Turner, and then eventually they did release the mugshot, which like made him look a little bit more
He
appropriate.
looked kind of crazy.
Yeah, he did.
Like
With
his
like
eyes-
his eyes were like, like there were bags, like crazy
Uh-huh.
bags.
Yeah, and it's like when I saw the mugshot photo, it's like he didn't look any more criminal. He didn't look like less criminal than like a mugshot of a black person.
Yeah.
So it was like appropriate. And I saw some people complain that like, uh, we shouldn't have used like those nice pictures of the people that were killed by police. But the thing is, those people like didn't actively seek out to harm anyone. Like I still don't know where I am of like whether it was like justified or not. Like I wasn't there and I didn't look into the information enough. But it's a little bit fair to use those pictures because
they're the victims.
they were the
Mhm.
victims of a killing. And especially in Trayvon Martin's case, like in that case, I'm convinced that like he shouldn't have been killed, and that wasn't Zimmerman like went up to him when he was specifically told not to go up to him. But yeah, it's just the fact that these people are victims. Of course, they weren't like the best people ever, but they're not famous for committing a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think image is very, very important. I was watching this video. It was meant to be funny, but it was very, very shocking. So there was a guy who went on Google Images and he typed in 3 black teenagers.
Oh yeah, I saw this.
Yeah, and there were like mugshots of like criminals and stuff, and then he erased the black and then he put in white 3 white teenagers, and there were like pictures of like
like happy kids.
happy kids in school
Stock photos.
studying things like that,
Exactly.
which it was meant to be funny obviously, but it was also quite shocking. See, that's the race side of it is we automatically judge people based on their we automatically link actions with race, which is it's really sad.
Yeah,
it's
I mean
very sad.
that's what's driving Trump's political campaign right now is he's like associating like greedy and like wants to take over the world with China, and he's associating like rape and violence with Mexicans, and just I don't know. Image is very important in like your judgment of people as a whole, and so that's why there was all that outrage about like which photo people were using. But I think the scary part for me is that like the media was just, allowing all this in the beginning, and it took the outrage of like people on social media and stuff until the media finally started criticizing Brock Turner for his actions. Like previously to that, they were using those nice pictures and they were like publishing what his father was saying and stuff like that. But then like it took people like to get the trending on Twitter and just like people's outrage in general to finally start to see like the mugshot and like the actual effects of this guy's actions. And that just I don't know. I don't trust the media basically. Like I think it's a very unreliable source of information, even though we don't really have another source. So this kind of thing just exemplifies that to me.
I
Yeah.
think in part when people blame the media for a lot of things in general, but when I think about the media, I kind of distinguish it between your news stations, which is primarily on TV, but they also have their online where they have the articles, and then you have all the kind of journalist websites where journalists themselves write things. And I've always been I think in this arena with combating, what images we use for people and how biased our representation of people are, I think the journalism side does a better job because, of course, we can talk a whole bunch about how news is like entertainment more than news. And they just want to put up a photo that'll get people talking about. If they put up a mugshot of a black person, that's what gets people talking. And then if they there's a rapist that was actually like this clean white guy, they can put up a nice graduation photo, and that'll get people talking even more. But I think that push towards using the right photo did come the most from like regular people on Twitter and Facebook. But I think journalists have somewhat of a voice in that because they're a little more individual, even though their individual places they're posting have their biases. But and in that sense, I can. It's weird because in a way I trust these journalism sites more than these news sources on
Like
TV.
sites like the Independent and Vox and the Atlantic
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
But then at the same time, some of them are extremely biased. Like when I think of liberal bias, I think of the Huffington Post. Like I've never seen one thing on the Huffington Post that I trusted. And then when I think of right wing bias in these sites, I think of Breitbart. Although some things on Breitbart, because I like some people that write on Breitbart. So
I don't even know what that website is.
it's a pretty conservative. It's like the
Okay.
conservative version of Huffington Post.
Okay.
But I like some of the people on there,
Mhm.
so I'm a little bit more trusting of them.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you can have this whole discussion about like which of these sources is more biased. But I don't want to derail it. I'm just trying to say that these journalism sites are another thing we have, another tool we have to fight against just what ABC 7 News or whatever throws up the second something happens.
Yeah, the problem is most people get their news from TV though, or
Mhm.
like they don't really try to delve into topics and research them and stuff. So that's why I think that like when I talk about the media, I'm talking about like these news stations like ABC and NBC and Fox and stuff, and how like misrepresented their like articles and stuff like that are just because of like that's where most people get their news from. So it's a problem.
Yeah, I think what saddens me the most though about this entire like case is like there's so much outrage. Like you see all this all this defiance against Brock Turner, and we were only able to bring out a mugshot. We weren't
Mhm.
able to and the sentence shortened,
Yeah.
like after everything, all this like resistance, like we were able to bring out a mugshot, but then we weren't able to make a longer sentence. Instead, the sentence was shortened, and that kind of like tells you a lot about the legal system that we have in this country and how it's not a good representation of what Americans believe in. Even if you, I mean, this is kind of derailing a little bit, but even if you think of Donald Trump, you see all this resistance, you see all this outrage, but then you don't realize that there's also so much support, and which is why he's like the Republican candidate for for the election. So we see all this outrage, we see all this, we see all the the negativity towards Brock Turner, but we don't see the support. And I think that all that support is the legal system. You know.
Um, just a little bit off the Trump, a little bit off what you were saying. I think one of the problems with this is social media has us within these closed circles where, people who we talk to on social media are more likely to hold the same opinions as us,
Right.
So we get kind of in these bubbles, and like all of us in the Nova area and just like the people that we know, we're all going to be hating on Trump. We're going to be like, Trump is terrible. Why is Trump here? But then someone else's bubble, everyone could be supporting Trump. And so we get inside these bubbles, and it radicalizes our views towards a certain thing. But we don't realize that there's opposition and that there's like other discussions to be had. And I think that's one victory that like we need to take advantage of with this Brock Turner case, is that we have this pertinent issue that people are aware of right now. It should be the way that we talk about this sort of thing. We need to talk about the justification issue and how people are trying to justify this sort of thing. We need to talk about the race issue. We need to talk about the gender differences in perception of this issue. And like that's what we need to get from this whole thing, is that we really need to have discussions about this sort of thing so that things can get accomplished.
Mm-hmm. But there is something frustrating, although I don't feel right in being frustrated about when you talk about the judicial system, is that like I was saying earlier, like I didn't know what they were talking about in the court case, and then it comes out, and then there's all this outrage in it, and I've seen like people petition to get Brock Turner to get like a longer sentence, and the thing is, court cases aren't like a national democracy. Like he received a fair trial, and that was the verdict, and I disagree with it, but it's like, yes, it was a fair trial to whatever extent that is, but he was given the trial, so we can't, if he was ruled guilty but given a short sentence, that doesn't give anyone in the country the right to start a popular vote, and we can't the country can't vote on the sentence that someone gets. And so it frustrates me that we can't do that, but it's the truth. Like we just can't do that, as much as we don't like to, but that doesn't mean we dismiss it. That means there's must be something wrong with how we judge people and their crimes if we can't get this guy with a lot of evidence to get a longer sentence. Because of course, with a lot of these rape cases, there's you have to hold until there's evidence, like with the Virginia rape case a couple years ago, which was blown out in Rolling Stone and everyone was like behind it, and then it turned out to be a hoax. So things like that just cast doubt on rape cases. So in situations where there probably was a rape, people are going to be more skeptical, and that's not a good thing. But of course, you don't want people to be completely accepting of every single rape case. So it's just, we have to look at how the judicial system works better, so that we don't have to have a nationwide poll on whether this guy was guilty or not. Because that's not, you can't put someone in jail because like half the country wants it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a big problem with this was like the judge had a controversial history, and like people like didn't respect the sentence. And I don't know if it's a problem with our judicial system or with this judge in particular is a big thing, because like apparently this judge had this like controversial history where, I don't know, people didn't always agree with what his rulings were and stuff. So I don't know, maybe it should be a thing where we should be allowed to get a case re-looked at. Well, I mean, there's like appeals and stuff, but like the thing is, like the general population can't make an appeal go through, But like, should we have that power or not? I don't know.
Well, we shouldn't. Like, there's a reason we don't, and it's because we weren't there sitting in the court having the evidence read to us.
Yeah, that's true. But like now, all the court documents are out. We're done with all that, and we can all look at it. Like there are some cases that are closed, but this case in particular is very, very open.
Mhm.
And so if it's going to be open like that and we're going to be outraged, everyone's going to want something to change so that this doesn't happen again.
Mhm. You can argue, oh, you think that sounds like a terrible thing, but isn't that what we do with our presidential elections? Like, we have all this information out here. Like, there's all this information out here showing all these terrible things Hillary has done. There's all this information showing all these terrible things Trump has done. So if you're not going to be willing to read it and look into it, then you're going to vote for the wrong person. You're going to doom everyone to having a terrible president. But I guess then you can say it's the thing of we're talking about someone's life and whether they committed a crime or not. I mean, not just talking about this case. Like, you're having people that most of them probably didn't even look into it, voting on whether this person spends their whole life in jail. And then, I mean, talking about the judicial system deeper and not just in this case, I heard a while ago, Malcolm Gladwell brought up this point. He was talking about how you always hear people say that minorities get longer sentences for the same crimes, which is true, and it's like one of my big problems with the judicial system. So he brought up this idea of, and I don't know if he originally brought it up, he just said it in something I was listening to, that the jury doesn't see the suspect, and having some way where they're not in the same room, so you don't know what the person looks like. And then when they talk, having some way where when they talk, it's kind of disguised. You know how, like, in witness protection, they'll have, like, the person's voice is, like, altered. So then you can't even hear what that person sounds like. So you can't say, that person sounds black. Although, like, there's been a million times where I heard someone's voice and I thought they were white, or I thought they were black, and then, like, they were the opposite. So I like that idea, and maybe there might be some problems with it, but I just like the idea of not seeing someone, because just the way someone looks is going to affect so much what people think of the crime.
Don't we have the right to, like, face our persecutors, though, and to an to add that our juries and stuff? So I don't know if that would work.
That might be the case, because I think there's all these, like, doesn't the defendant have some right to see their
persecutor?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I'm done with high school. Anyways, let's try to get back to the case of all this rape and stuff. How much? This is for Karunya. How much do you think, like, campus culture has to do with this?
So ever since I think the alcohol age changed from 21 to 18 to 21. I think it's had a huge impact on, like, college campus, like, rapes and stuff. We think that raising the alcohol age would benefit the society, but it's like the same thing. People are doing it in secret, and Brock Turner was underage drinking. He was 19 when this happened. He was a year older than me, and he committed a crime that's, like, unforgivable, and that's because I wouldn't say it's because, but he was under the influence. And
his alcohol level was twice the legal limit, and the girl's was 3 times the legal limit. But I'm pretty sure she was legal.
22.
Yeah,
She wasn't underage drinking. She was 22. So, but yeah, campus culture definitely has a huge impact on everything that goes on. I think also, like, the mindset that people have in college, that they could do whatever they want to. They have freedom. They just like that concept of freedom is just so instilled into college students that compels them to do things like this.
People throw the term rape culture around, and I'm a little bit hesitant to argue that there's that extent, because I don't think the majority of boys are running around acting like it's okay to rape people and sexually harass them. But I mean, of course, there are a ton of people out there who there's people out there who in an unaltered state will rape someone, and those are some really terrible, messed up people. But then there's people that are suggestive to it, so if they're under the right amount of alcohol or influence of anything, they might be more willing to do it, and it's all based on the situation. So of course, like, I'm trying to say, like, most men aren't, rapists.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I also don't want to say like here's the very small percentage of people that will rape someone in any situation. Like people can become suggestive to it, and the situation can alter people's idea. So like I said, like, in order to stop rape, like jokingly, but not really to say just don't rape people. But then of course there you can say things like you just need to we need to let our young men know that you need to take caution and knowing that this person is consenting. And it's like I'm not saying like don't have drunk sex or like have like be a little tipsy when you're having sex. Like that's cool and it makes it like better for people or whatever. But like you need to exercise a lot of caution. Like if you have any idea that this might not be a good thing, like this person might not be totally down with this, then you need to stop. And then also on the other side, where people receive some hate, they say like, ladies, watch out, control, like don't drink so much that you're blacking out. You might have seen things where there's like signs on college campuses like giving tips to women, like don't walk alone at night, make sure people know where you are at all times. And people have like vandalized it because they think it's like blaming women. Like it's not blaming women for being raped for giving out those tips. But then when someone gets raped, you don't go to them and tell them, hey, you should have done this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not down with you blaming someone for being raped.
Yeah, there's that whole debate that's like, it's like, should you have to act in your own self-defense versus should you act in your own self-defense, you know? So it's like, obviously, we should all be able to walk down a dark street at night and be completely safe. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality of the world. So we need to take precautions. But then there's people that believe that when you warn someone to take precautions, what you're basically saying is we're not going to let society be responsible for what happens to you when you walk down this dark street. And so it's kind of an interesting debate because obviously both sides are right. You know, like you shouldn't have to be scared for your life ever, you know, but you still need to be able to like defend yourself or like be aware of your surroundings and stuff. So I don't know.
Adding on to that, there's that whole debate with like gender equality, and it's like, oh, this is not fair. You know, how come girls have to be more careful on the roads than guys? It's what you said. It's the reality of it. You know, you can't really. Women are more prone to sexual assault than men. You know, statistics show it. That's just how it is. So I don't understand why some extreme feminists think that you know, society has this. The society thinks that it's their duty to like protect women more because they're more vulnerable or more more exposed, things like that. But that's not the intention. The intention is to protect everyone, and it just so happens that women are more prone to things like that.
Yeah, I mean, like if you live in a bad neighborhood and someone's like, hey, you should get like an extra lock for your door, you know, you're not going to be offended at that. You're going to be like, yeah, you're probably right, you know. Exactly. And it's that same thing, you know. So obviously we should all be working towards fixing these problems, but while we're doing that, you still need to be prepared for the worst case situation.
Patrick looked at me and smiled when you said extreme feminism because he knows I spend a lot of time complaining about like really far, really extreme feminists. Because you were touching on this idea that some really far out there feminists have, that like all these things that aren't the responsibility of society, and what I'm saying is things that are like by nature are somehow like oppressive and things that the patriarchy have carried out. Right. We were talking about this last night in relation to not feminism, but in raising like gender neutral children and transgenderism. And Patrick and I both are supportive of transgender people. But when it comes to people that say, I don't like the idea that the second you're born, the doctor looks at you for 2 seconds and then for your life decides what gender you are. Like, no, the doctor didn't decide that, nature did, because you were born with certain parts. I said born with certain parts. That's going to sound like insane to people that are of this belief. But things like women are naturally going to be more prone to rape because they're generally smaller and might actually be less likely to defend themselves or just appear to be less likely to defend themselves. So of course men get raped as well, and that's another thing you can talk about. But women are raped more because they're more prone to being raped, and of course because like to whatever extent you want to argue, the male sex drive is more energetic and powerful than women's, and like some men can't control that. But then some people bring up the argument. I like this too. Like women bring this up when they're proponents of like not telling. Well, I don't want to say women that are proponents of, because like everyone should be a proponent of the idea that what a woman wears shouldn't like affect it. And these women say like that should offend you as a guy, because that's basically saying that you have no control over yourself. Like I see, of course, like guys see like an attractive woman in like some nice clothes, and like they're like start sweating. They're like, oh my god, she looks
Sweating.
amazing.
No,
yeah,
but the thing is, the same thing
that doesn't
happens
mean you
for
go and rape
women
them.
too.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
girls see a guy who's like well dressed and looks good, and like we think the same thing. It's like the same. It's literally like, you know, the same thing, but it's just
Yeah.
more. It's more publicized on the other side.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
this weird disconnect between like how genders respond to one another, you know? And
Mhm.
something that that I was thinking of earlier when Eric was talking about this kind of about oh dang, I forget what you were talking about exactly. But just like the thing that kind of scares me sometimes is how like there's this stereotype that like women should be able to say no and the guy will still come after them. Like it makes it seem like when a woman is saying no, she's saying yes, you know, in a way. Like, 'cause I mean, everyone wants to feel wanted, you know? So like when you I don't know, like when you're angry at your boyfriend or something and you're like, "Oh no, I don't want you to like follow me or whatever." You actually do want them to follow you. And I mean, I'm not going to say that I've never done that, you know, like I've done that same thing to a girl, you know, but like it kind of frightens me to a certain extent, because we should be telling people that like when a woman says no, that means no, and also when a man says no, it means no. And we should be telling people to say what's on their mind, you know, because that's kind of where this problem is. Like everyone wants everyone else to read their minds, you know. It's just like, I just want you to know how I feel and do the exact right thing to help me out. And so like when that gets extended to sex, that's when it starts getting scary, you know, because like I know that, you know, some rapists justify their actions by saying like, oh, she actually wanted it, you know, like even though she was saying no, I know that she wanted it. And like that's the problem, is that there's this societal view that like when a woman says no, she actually just wants to be like convinced and pressured, you know.
Yeah, that probably comes from what you're saying, is like when guys deal with women for the most part and they say no, it's like one of those things like they really want you to come at them.
Yeah.
And then there's all these things like, you know, girls post all these things on Twitter. They're like, oh my god, if a guy did this for me. And sometimes some of them are like a scene from a movie where the girl's mad and then like the guy just comes up and kisses her randomly, and it's like, oh, so if I act like I don't want him, and it like they're showing that like they love the fact that even if they're acting like they don't want their guy to bother them, then the guy still wants to be with them. But like so that's probably where some of that comes from. But we need to be able to tell guys that you need to make the distinction that there's something very different between your girlfriend who's like okay with you being with her and like wants you to love her, and of course a whole another thing is like women being raped by the person they're in a relationship with. But you need to let them know that there's a distinction between you know, kissing your girlfriend when she's mad and being at a party with someone you don't know who's obviously not in any condition to give you consent, and them saying no and then you raping them.
Yeah, in Aziz Ansari's like newest TV show and special, he like talks about how some women, like guys, just follow them. Like that's a thing where like guys just think it's okay to just follow girls randomly, I guess. Or like they'll be at a bar and the guy will be hitting on a girl and like she'll be like, nah, and then like he'll follow her home or something. And that when I heard about that, I was like, I never realized that that was a thing, but apparently that's a thing that happens to like a bunch of girls like who go to bars and stuff. And I was just like, this is insane. Like
Yeah.
I don't understand the thought process, you know, like of just following someone. Like, oh, if I follow her, then she'll want to go out with me. Like, that
Mhm.
just doesn't make sense to me. But apparently that makes sense to some people. It just, I don't know, it freaks me out.
I think for this case, especially with the Brock Turner case, I feel like it's just an excuse for it's one of those many justifications for his actions. Is that, oh, she was passed out behind a dumpster. Do you think she wasn't thinking rationally? I mean, I do not believe in the fact that, she said yes. She said yes. I'm 110% sure she didn't say anything. But that's just one of and like the fact that we even agree to that, like no means yes, that's just absurd. That like society actually thinks that that's a way to justify rape.
That it's even like romantic to a
Yeah,
certain extent.
yeah.
Um, so I want to talk about one detail of the case that I saw about. Like, a witness apparently said that they saw Brock Turner with his phone out and the light was on. And so like people don't know if like he was using it as a flashlight or like if he was taking like a picture or video of what happened. And then like they said that when they went through his phone, he had a text that said, "Whose breast is that?" on like as a reply to him. So it's just like there's the chance that he might have actually like taken a picture or like a video of what he did after he did it. And that creeps me out because that's like what's it called? Like a trophy almost, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's some like serial killer action, like when they like collect people's fingers or something like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think we should talk about that because that just kind of freaks me out.
That's pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
What do you want to say about that?
I don't really know. I just thought it was something that should be mentioned.
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
It's just something to bring up because
Yeah.
that's like you're even more guilty. It's like if you weren't guilty enough, like that's some pretty messed up stuff.
That shows that he has no what's the word? Like he doesn't regret
Empathy.
it at all.
Empathy. Or-
Not that. Like I'm not trying to say he's a sociopath or anything.
It kind of
like
seems like he knew what he was doing.
that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what is even more scary.
Yeah, exactly. Because like if he's taking a picture, that means that he's proud of it almost.
Mhm.
You know, like
See, that happens all the time. Like you have, guys who, meet a girl for the first time and they have sex and then they're like, yeah, I like, I totally did it with her. Like it's a proud thing that people feel,
Mhm.
and that's just how I think it's of recent years that's actually come to light, and that's actually like a big deal now. And that's just the Brock Turner case, like with what you said. That's just like like an amplified version of that.
yeah, because yeah, something that's getting a lot of attention is the distinction between like a guy who sleeps around a lot and a girl who sleeps around a lot. Like people are always saying like, why is a girl who sleeps around a lot considered like a slut or a whore,
Mhm.
when a guy who sleeps around a lot is like seen as like a champion by his peers, you know?
Mhm.
And that's something that's definitely messed up, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
Because it's almost construing women as like prey to be hunted or something like that, which that's kind of an exaggeration, but it's, I don't know, I think it serves my point well, is that and that's a scary viewpoint to look at the opposite gender as.
Mhm. I know we were talking about that last night, and it's like I've become pretty good at like not like seeing a woman that like has sex a lot and being like, oh my god, she's a slut, because I do realize like when it comes to sex, like women actually are like, well, can be pretty much as powerful as women. Like they can be just as thirsty as the young folks like to say as men. But there's also like, so when it comes to like consensual sex, I don't want people to see women as like it being less favorable for women to engage in sex as men. But then when it comes to things like rape, then you should realize that women are like the prey. They are more likely to be targeted, and that absolutely does not diminish men that are raped. But that those are both true. But then sometimes in like extreme feminism, that gets exploited into the fact that women are at the same time the victims and the aggressors, and this also happens in like other forms of extreme stuff, like where groups are considered oppressed. So you can't both at the same time be the victim and the aggressor. And the fact that you can't say that like just in general, not in like sexual things, like women are treated horribly and then go and be extremely sexist towards men. But in this situation, that's a fair thing to say, because when it comes to consensual sex, women have just as much power and should be respected in their sexual decisions as much as men. But in rape, it's like, no, women are being preyed on the most.
Well, the thing is though, like it demeans it when sexual assault happens to men, or like when sexual assault happens to men, or when like domestic abuse happens to men, you know, because women are always seen as the victims in those cases. And so when it happens to men, like there's straight up accounts of where police don't believe like what happens. Like I've read so many stories online where a man is being domestically abused, like because there's the whole stigma that like men shouldn't hit women, you know. So if you're being physically abused by your spouse who is a woman and you're a man, then like if you were raised like normally, then there's that stigma within you that says like, oh, I can't hit her back or anything like that, like you can't defend yourself. And over time, like she would just get that control over you. This guy went to the police and he was like, I'm being domestically abused, and they told him to get control over his wife. And it's just like, that's not what's going on, you know. This guy is being abused, but because women are always perceived as the victims, that means that he can't be the victim, and that's a problem that really needs to be looked at in today's society.
If a guy brought that up anywhere, I like guarantee someone would say, "Be a man." Like,
Yeah.
just suck it up, and like, you know. And it. You might have seen the videos. These were pretty popular a while ago. The videos where like they're in public and there's a guy and a girl actor. So the first one is like the girls hitting the guy in public and everyone's like laughing. And then the next one is the guys hitting the girl, and like within 2 seconds, everyone just runs up. But yeah, that's a whole another thing, and one of those things where the far right feminists don't show up on, because it's like, oh, but according to us, like, so when the extreme feminists want like women to be in power and they want women to do things, then they talk about how powerful women are. Like, look at Hillary Clinton. She's a powerful woman. She can do anything a man can do. Look at how powerful women are. But then, of course, that's true, because women can do anything men can. But then at the same time, when women are being oppressed, then it's all because then there's basically saying how weak women are. And of course, there needs to be this distinction between what I'm saying there and what I'm saying about women being raped, and that women are the prey. But then when they look at, if you were to bring up, you know, domestic abuse towards men, then they would say, oh, that guy needs to suck it up because he's a man, and obviously women are the weak ones and men are the strong ones. Well, now you're being sexist towards men, and you're not, and you have so much outrage towards domestic abuse, but only when it's towards women.
Yeah, I actually, for my work, they made us attend a training on sexual abuse, and the guy who talked to us, he basically told us the story about a boss who was an employee who was being sexually abused by his or her boss. And then after he finished the story, like, you know, throughout the story, I was like, oh wow, so the boss must be a really bad man. Like, you know, look at him. He's like sexually abusing this employee. And then at the end of the story, the guy says the boss was a woman and the employee was a man, and the man was being sexually abused. So that's just like I was like mind blown. I was like, wow, this entire time I thought, like, my mind thought that the employee was a woman and the boss was a man. And that just told me that, you know, society has kind of like carved out these thoughts within us, and like I'm not the type of person to think that, but I did, because it's just that I've grown up in that kind of society, and that's just really sad. So yeah, so what you said with and like that's why it took so long for the employee to come out with that story, because, you know, people would say, you know, be a man, you know, step up, you know, do whatever she does to you to back to her.
And
You're talking about like, uh, I like when people like point out that even they were like being judgmental and something. And so my situation, my experience with that is I've always had this idea that like another thing people talk about is like, oh, men are more sexual, they always want it, they'd be less likely to be like uncomfortable if someone were to sexually harass them. So I've always been like, yeah, if some girl did something to me, like I'd probably be less likely than a woman to be like bothered by it. But I remember there was some girl in school that like seemed pretty into me, and so like I wasn't interested in her. So like sometimes I'd be walking in the hall and she would kind of like brush up against me and like kind of linger, and I was extremely uncomfortable. So that kind of changed my view. I was like, no, I would not just be okay with someone doing anything even if I'm not into them. So then that kind of changed my mind of like men are just as likely to be bothered by sexual advances that they don't want than women are.
That's why I think that like gender equality and all that, it's unlike any other issue that we've had before, like on a social level. Like for like gay rights or rights for black people or like women's suffrage or anything, there's always like um a dominant side and the side that like needs the rights. So like women needed the right to vote and blacks needed the right to vote and like their freedom, and gays needed the right to get married and stuff. But in a gender equality issue, like it's a two-way street, and that's why I always say that this needs to be a discussion. Like we can't just have rallies and protests and stuff, because that's only looking at one side of the story. And I think that's especially hard in today's society because we all get offended really easily these days. And that's the problem, because like there are some rights that women have that men don't have, and there are some rights that men have that women don't have, whether they're like societal rights or actual rights written in laws. And so that's why this is like a unique problem that needs to be in a discussion form rather than like protests and stuff like that.
You were talking about that to me last night, and I kind of didn't know exactly what you were talking about. But yeah, that makes more sense because another because there's definitely injustices on both sides, and when you're talking about race, you can definitely argue like, okay, we need to help minorities, but if you put in affirmative action and then I don't get the job or I don't get into the school because they were like, oh, we need another Latino person in here, then of course that's not fair. But the majority of the stuff is to bring that side more equal. But here there's so many things on the women's side and the men's side that are unequal and not related to sexual harassment or rape, but another gender equality issue that is gaining a little bit more attention is who wins custody in divorce cases. And so of course it's a like stereotypical thing that women are the better caretakers. And so the problem is sometimes in situations where the mother is abusive, she gets the children. And I saw this one story recently where this woman was she didn't win custody, and then she was like crying and like completely like she didn't know what to do with her life because she was like, I can't imagine not being with my two children for most of the time and not being able to see what they're up to and just being able to spend time with their children. And it's like, now you know how every man that has ever lost a custody case feels.
Yeah, yeah. On that note, I think we're going to have to end it there. So have a good day, night, or whatever, and thank you for listening.